great to have you all with us. I'm going to hand you over now to our speaker today, Danielle Hamilton from Thrive, about this crucial topic, especially today. How do you get your face-to-face training online and digitized? Danny, over to you.
Thanks, Donald. I just want to start by saying I absolutely love Good Housekeeping. Massive fan, so it's really interesting you used to work there. I used to have all the books when I was a kid, just to start me off cooking. Can I just check that you can see my screen, Donald?
We can see the screen and we can hear you.
Perfect, lovely, that's great. Okay, so today we're here to talk about the digital classroom and some steps to digitise your face-to-face training. So I don't want to spend much time talking about why lots of people are interested in doing this at the moment, because I think you probably heard it enough over the last few weeks and months. So I'll just get straight into the detail. Little bit on who I am. So I'm the Chief Customer and Product Officer at Thrive Learning. So I look after our customer-facing teams, but I also lead the vision behind our learning experience platform. My background is in nurturing learning cultures and just helping clients do this sort of stuff, for digitising L&D, as well as rolling out learning programs and platforms.
My background, I've worked at City & Guilds Kineo, at Fuse Universal, and then I had a stint working in internal L&D for MSD, which is a large pharmaceutical company as well. So I've been on both sides of the fence and actually experienced putting this into practice in real life, which was very interesting. So I want to start off with a question for everyone. Before I go on to explain my 8 steps that I think work for digitising training, I'm keen to hear from you guys of what you think the most crucial step is when it comes to digitising training.
This is really, really interesting. I can't wait to see the answers to this. I suspect that with 130 people in the room, we're going to get quite a few answers. I'm going to allow the chat just to roll for a bit. But you know what? We're getting a very, very strong theme emerging here. And it's 2 sides of the same coin. One is interactivity, as Sam says, and the other, as Mike too says, engagement. Now, there are other points to it as well, but that's the key thing that's coming through. Now, interestingly, we've got, after that initial flurry, Jill is saying confidence. Could you explain what we mean by confidence there? And Fran is saying being learner focused. I'm interested in that, Fran. I'm not quite sure. No, I mean, I know what you mean, and I'm actually learning online myself at the moment, so I know it's difficult for trainers. Colleen says, get people to change their way of thinking and learning. Quality and repeatability, says Henrik, sorry. But I think the key thing that's coming through here is there's things around the confidence and the feeling of speakers and of learners. But I think the key thing that we're getting here.
I'm on a
Danny,
webinar about digital learning.
Okay, somebody's dialed in and hasn't muted. If you are dialing in, please mute. Okay. And there's other things here as well. Charles is saying nothing about the technology. Adapting the pedagogy is critical. I love it, Charles. Could you explain a bit more? But it's mostly here about engaging people with interactive content. Now, Danny, is that what you were expecting? Because I wasn't expecting to be quite so, there being such a strong thread of that. But is that what you were expecting?
I think it's kind of a rogue question, because I think the answer is probably there's not one step that's the most crucial.
You're so cheeky, Danny, so cheeky.
Sorry. But I do think that some of those points really resonate with me. I think particularly the confidence one and the sort of making sure things are geared up for the learner themselves. So I think a lot of the cases when I'm working with people on these sorts of programs is that a big part of it is lack of confidence in the L&D team to actually take these steps, and they get a bit of a fear of that. They think it's going to be harder than it actually is and take more time. And that's what I'm hoping I can help today, is like alleviate some of those fears.
And I just want to give a shout out to Charles Jennings and Cosmina Kerman, who both said the same thing essentially, which is don't just try and take a face-to-face delivery mechanism and stick it online. It won't work. Okay, so yes. I'm going to hand it back to you, Danny.
Absolutely, yes, it's really important as well. So hopefully some of those themes will come out today, particularly around putting the learner first and the interactivity and that sort of thing. But yeah, it's really interesting to see that those themes are coming through as well. Oh, sorry, skipped too far. Okay, so what we're here to talk about today is essentially how we can use a flipped classroom methodology to quickly break down face-to-face courses into useful micro-resources and how that can then impact on delivery techniques. So I wanted to start with a simple definition of what the flipped classroom is, as it's going to be core to the next steps I'll take you through. Now, this isn't obviously the only element of digitising training. It's just, I think, the framework that I tend to use when I'm looking at how to break down training. So this is a little definition that I pulled together, but there's a lot online. I've just adapted it slightly because a lot of some of the things to be online are more for education. And the question I want to ask is, why are we doing this? Apart from the obvious of things going on in the world at the moment and trying to reduce face-to-face or not being able to do face-to-face, why do you want to flip the classroom? Because I think this is something that's really valuable to do at any point. So the first one is that by doing this, it will provide you with a bank of resources you can use to deliver your audience up front before they attend the session. And what that means is you can then open up the session to do more practical, useful tasks, which involve actually applying the knowledge. So rather than people sitting there bored out of their brains where you stand there and do a presentation, a bit like I'm doing now actually, ironically, you actually can use that face-to-face time or that contact time to do more valuable things. The side effect of that is that it can reduce your face-to-face time, or in this case, it can actually make it a bit more bearable being on video. So say you've got a full day course and actually that ends up being just 2 hours on video, that's not quite as bad. The great thing about making the bank of resources is that then they are also available after the session, because people forget stuff, right? You know, you never remember anything you learn at a training session, just a few things. So it's really good to actually give resources to after so they can actually go back and query things. And in a way, you can also then, if you wanted to, make that bank of resources available to a wider audience. So you're actually catching more people who maybe don't necessarily need to go to the face-to-face training, but actually there are benefits of some of the resources. And ultimately what you're trying to do here is save a trainer fatigue as well. So rather than standing in front of the room delivering the same thing again and again, you know, give them a bit of a break, get them to do something a bit different. It's, you know, I've been there training and you feel like, oh, you're just repeating yourself over and over. So it's quite nice to do something slightly different. And once I think you go through the process of flipping a classroom and breaking down a course, you then need to ask yourself, is it actually a course? Because sometimes when you go down and extract the more practical elements out of a face-to-face training day, you find that, well, this is really just a communication piece, or maybe this is actually just a bank of resources and how-tos. So these are just some reasons of why I think it's really important to flip the classroom. And so now I'm going to jump into my step-by-step guide where I talk through a bit more practicalities around that. I've tried to keep this fairly practical, so you can actually take this away and try and implement this as well. And these are the steps that we're going to be going through, just so you can see there are 8 steps. And there is a link at the bottom here as well, because we've digitized this presentation into like a how-to guide. So feel free to follow that link if you want to download the guide and read offline. Again, in case you forget stuff or want to go back to things. And I'm going to start with the first step, which is extracting the facts. So this first step is to take a look at your face-to-face course and extract anything which is pure delivery of information. So anything where you know you're simply standing up in front of the room, in front of slides, talking at people. So you want to remove that from the face-to-face. So a good way to identify these aspects is to think about not only your handouts and your slides and resources you use, but also what are those key phrases or sections that you know that you repeat a lot, almost word for word in your training sessions. And what are the part of the sessions that you know by heart and never really change? You can also, as I said, flip through handouts, workbooks, that sort of thing, and look at things like definitions, process explanations, and lists, and that's sort of common information that you can pull together. So as an example, I run a workshop at Thrive on program design, which is pretty much this presentation actually, and all the information I'm going to give you today is delivered up front as videos and infographics. And one reason I do that is because then when I actually sit down with my clients, I can get them to bring along a program session and we can just work on breaking that down. I don't have to go through all of this stuff, which is more of the theory behind it, I guess. So you might be thinking, I think someone mentioned this in the chat earlier as well, can't we just deliver the slides and the handouts to people up front and that can act as our resource bank and that's done? And I see this happen sometimes and it's really ineffective. For one, slides should be prompts, not actual information. So it's really hard for a learner to get any value from slides. And you're also asking people to consume a lot of information in one format which can't be searched in future if people forget stuff. So what we're trying to do here is make a bank of useful resources that answer specific questions. And the way to do this is to break down the information, not necessarily based on time, but on concepts. Now, I'm a strong believer in micro-content, and there's a huge amount of research out there around the ideal length of content. And yes, in an ideal world, we would be making videos that are, no more than 4 minutes long or 1 to 2 minutes optimum. However, if you go about trying to chop your content up based on time alone, you sometimes will end up with resources which don't really make sense. So if you focus on the concept you're trying to get across, I find that thinking about the question someone would write into Google can really help. As that way of thinking to really get to the problem of which that piece of content is trying to solve. So think about the problem you're trying to solve and what's the question I'm looking for as an end user, and that will give you the concept. So a simple example could be in a course about coaching, you might cover concepts such as what is coaching, what is mentoring, and what's the difference between mentoring and coaching. And these are all 3 separate concepts. I might be interested in any of these, and I might be, quote unquote, Googling any of those. So there should be 3 pieces of content. And the idea is that every concept becomes a piece of micro-content. So once you've gone through the process of extracting everything out, identifying where are all the concepts, you can then really just pull this into a list. And this is really just a spreadsheet where you capture everything that you've got. And it can act as a bit of a project plan for actually digitising that content. For each item you put on the list, it's good to decide the best format. So for example, one concept might be talking about why something is important. And for this, you'll probably want to create a video with an expert, as they'll most likely be authentic and passionate enough to get this message across and get a bit of buy-in from learning. Just general rules like hearts and minds pieces are very good as animation and video. But on the other hand, you might have some key statistics to share, which would be best delivered as an infographic, and then another concept might be a process, so a list or a flow diagram might be better. And if you can mix the formats up, then great, as it will be more engaging for the learner who are going through the content in one go, rather than just death by video or death by PowerPoint or whatever it might be. And once you know the format, you can then think about who your stars will be. So I always refer to them as stars rather than experts necessarily, because it's not always the experts. So think about who's best to create the content and who's best to be the star, and it can be the same person or different people. So ironically, sometimes if you use the expert, they're not the best person to actually explain a subject, because sometimes they know it so well, they're not that good at actually communicating the key information that, someone like a new starter or new to the subject would actually want to know. So in those cases, what I find really useful is to get the expert to explain it to a non-expert, ideally someone who is of the target audience, and then get the person they've explained it to explain it on a video, or to create the piece of content to explain that concept. And that way, what you end up with is someone who has listened to an explanation from an expert, digested it, had a conversation, and then repeated it back in the target audience language and picked out what they think is important for their role or whatever it might be. And it just translates a lot better. So some experts are amazing and great and really good at explaining things, and they're natural trainers. And some people you might have to sort of pair with someone else, and that can just be a really effective way to get that content out in a different way of speaking about it.
Danny, while we're talking about flipped classrooms and so on, and by the way, I'm learning Spanish online at the moment in a Zoom combination of Zoom classes, Skype conversations, and apps, and they're definitely trying to use a flipped classroom. We've got a great question here from Kate. I would normally wait till the end, but I think it's so pertinent, I'm going to just cut in now and ask it. Kate and Debbie too, is both asking the same question effectively, and it's something I've experienced when I've been training myself in the past. How do you get people to engage? I've had plenty of meetings where people arrive and they haven't skimmed the pre-reading, right? And this is a constant issue. People are supposed to do it and they don't do the stuff before they turn up. And all the activity you've got planned for the session, you can't do because people haven't done the pre-work. How do you deal with that? Any thoughts?
Very good question. The first one I would say is, what is that pre-work? So is that pre-work in the most engaging format it could be? So I've attended lots of training sessions where someone's asked me to read a 5-page PDF beforehand, and I've skimmed it on the train because I don't want to read a 5-page PDF, to be honest. So the first one is, is it in a format which is at least something people can do when they are on the train, but it's a bit more enjoyable, a bit more engaging, which is a small part of it. The other thing I'd say is I'm just really strict. With my people attend my workshops, so we do a similar method for our workshops at Thrive. I assign the learning as mandatory training through our LXP, and if they don't do it, I move the workshop, which I know is a very extreme way of doing it. But I think ultimately it's kind of the only way to do it, because otherwise you end up with some people there, like the classic teacher thing, right? Some people there, done all the pre-work, ready to go, ready to start applying it, and they're suffering because you've got someone else there who couldn't be asked to do it.
It's not fair on the people who've done the work. You're absolutely right.
Exactly, yeah. So I think if you can do checks beforehand, like if you're delivering through a platform, say, that's really helpful. And I literally would be turning people away from sessions if they hadn't done the training beforehand.
Kate Nicholson's giving you the thumbs up. She says, extreme, but I love it. She liked the fact that you're being a bit harsh with people. And demanding people take their learning seriously. Now, actually, a long time ago, I was training people on learning English in Istanbul, nothing to do with online, but I had people for 2 days, and the rest of the time it was during the week, and I had them for like 2-hour sessions, and I had to get the most out of that, and it was vital they did the homework. Same thing actually, but what I did was I got people to do the work beforehand, but had them check what they were doing between each other in groups. That led unexpectedly to peer pressure. People were expecting their colleagues to turn up having done the work beforehand so they could do this work in a group. So there is also a possibility of peer pressure if you put people into small groups where they can feel that from each other. And we've got other thoughts. Jeff says, have the delegates submit some pre-learning in advance. So that's your way of checking have they done it. Clint says it's a universal problem, and he uses or suggests possibly using quizzes. Suggests using e-learning pre-reading with a little test, Richard. So lots of ideas all around this, and Corinne sort of echoing my thoughts perhaps. Breakout rooms, so you have to work with others. Peer-to-peer learning, yes. Okay, right, I'm going to shut up because it's not about me, it's about Danny, but I just thought that was a really, because it's an issue I think anybody who's been in this position knows and has faced, and I thought it was important to bring it up. So Danny, back to you. Please keep the chat going in the room. Thank you. Danny.
No, definitely. I'm pleased you brought it up. Actually, I mentioned earlier that I have a program design workshop I run at Thrive. I've literally got a video called Should We Make the Pre-Work Mandatory, which is just about this particular subject. I think partly it's a cultural thing as well. I think if you start making it mandatory, then really mandatory, and you do that a few times and people miss a few courses, like people will get it and it will become a bit more norm. I think the peer-to-peer stuff is also really important. Peer pressure is just the best way to do stuff, as we all know. And that can be really helpful as well. Everyone's talking about it beforehand. Oh, I've done this. You think, oh, bugger, I better do that. So I think that's a really good point too. Okay, what we're talking about. Oh, yes, we're talking about pairing experts and novices. So finally in this phase, prioritising the content if you need to. This can be quite useful. It's a really simple thing. It could be based on availability and resource, or maybe you need to get something out quickly, and there could just be simply more elements which are more important. Particularly at the moment when we've got a lot of change happening, you can prioritise stuff in that way. Now, this may seem like a lot of work, and I think this is one of the pushbacks that I get from people, or the fears I get from people, is that all this will take me ages. But in reality, to get to this stage of having a sort of good content map, if you're working, say, a one-day course, it will only actually take you about an hour. So I've done this myself with a lot of different times with clients, but also myself when I was at MSD. And it actually takes a lot less time than you think, because a lot of the stuff is already there. You're just really just breaking it down and working out, okay, who sits with what. And sometimes for some courses there's one trainer, so it may be all for them, which is nice and easy. So I think the message there is don't worry too much about that part of it. So step 4 is getting creative. So this is thinking about what resources you need to make. And I think this part also puts people off, because I think people think that they need graphic design skills and all these fancy things and a whole team to do this, but actually that's not necessarily the case. And if you work in the right way, it can actually be really quick, simple, and quite fun as well. So firstly, a quick one, if you have multiple members in the team and you can divide and conquer, then that's great. You just allocate a few pieces of content to each person. It just makes it a bit quicker. That's quite a practical thing to do. But to actually create the content, there's a bunch of free or very cost-effective tools out there which you can use. And because they're full of templates, it's really easy to make great-looking content without graphic design skills. So please don't feel like you need content creators or a whole team of graphics people. It's actually much quicker to have someone who understands the content to make the resources. And then you didn't need to spend the time then writing the brief for the graphic designer doing it and it being a little bit wrong and then checking it and all that back and forth. And also remember, we pretty much all have phones with cameras, and mobile footage is a great way to quickly capture knowledge. So I went through this exact process when I was digitising our onboarding programme when I was at MSD. So we had like a 2-day session with loads of different presenters, and it was simply a case of booking 30 minutes with each of the experts in a quiet room with my phone and ask them a few questions. And most of the experts were done and dusted in about 15 minutes in reality, because they're so used to saying this stuff so often it just rolls off the tongue. It's so easy for them to just, so for example, I had a lady in there about from HR, and I was asking about like, what's your approach to HR, and she could just feel that off really easily. And she was actually brilliant. She was really good. But when you are creating videos, please, this is my biggest please, don't over-engineer it. So you don't need to write a script. You don't need to go through hundreds of changes before you can film someone. All that happens when you do that is end up with something really inauthentic and stale that your learners will quickly switch off from. If you think about how you react to natural YouTube videos versus something like an automated train announcement or a corporate video, like as soon as you hear that static, slightly robotic tone, you just switch off. And when you have scripts that people are reading, that's what you end up with. And by all means, if you have someone who's nervous on camera, then they can jot down some key points beforehand that they want to actually go through. But ultimately, if they know their stuff, they should be able to talk. And finally, a reminder to stick to one concept per content, as we discussed earlier. So I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent here, because while we're on the subject of content creation, I want to just look and highlight some key advice and tools that you can use. I've got loads of these tools that I use. This is just the tip of the iceberg, my favourites. But here's on a list which I think could be helpful for you. I'm happy to share any list with Donald or what have you as well if anyone needs anything in future.
Just quickly, we've had Lee said, just as you were doing this, recommendations for free tools, please. Now I'm sure that other tools are available, so and already people are jumping in with their passionate feelings. Berit loves Canva, so please do share your thoughts about tools as well. Don't just drop a name in, say what it's good for and why. Please give some further information about it. We've got 143 people in the room right now. This is a great opportunity for Lee and everybody else to get some great ideas. So you can put in for planning, use this. For recording video, use that. For screenshots, use the other, whatever. And if you've got a URL, let's get it all in that chat and really make this a powerful session for sharing. By the way, huge discussion going on. You can't see it, scripting or not scripting. We're going to talk about that at the end. Danny, back to you.
Thank you. I actually put a post on LinkedIn, I think about a week and a half ago, with a whole PDF of free tools that I split down into like writing, graphics, animation. If you look at my profile, you'll be able to see that as well. But yeah, Canva, oh my goodness, I'm just such a big fan of Canva. It's basically free. Well, it is free, and you can do, there is a premium level, but you don't really need it. And it just makes you look like such a good graphic designer, even though I'm not a graphic designer at all. It's just amazing. I actually went so far that I went out of my way to try and find them online to write a review. I didn't get asked to because I was that much of a fangirl. So Canva is definitely a great tool. So many templates, any sort of infographics, posters, presentations, slide deck, anything you want to make. Really good. Loom is an excellent tool for screen recording. So if you want to record either your webcam, just talking about something, or your screen, so really useful for things like systems training. I also use it for talking through presentations as well. So say you've got a presentation, like I was doing today, I might do like a quick version for my team to say, okay, this is roughly what I'm going to talk about, give me your thoughts, and people can feedback on it. So it's just a sales pitch or something like that, really useful for that. Or just recording your webcam. So if you want to do updates, so at the moment we've got lots of our clients who are doing updates for the business around things that are happening in the world, and they're just doing the webcam and popping it on. It's a really great tool. Nimbus is really good for screenshotting, just if you want to sort of do, like, again, consistency training or just show different aspects of tools you're using. ThingLink's a really cool tool as well. It's not 100% free, but it allows you to like take pictures or 360 videos, and then you can annotate it, so you can put little information buttons everywhere. So really good for things like health and safety training and that sort of thing, fire safety. Unsplash is simply a really good free image library for beautiful images. We actually integrate with that and like LXP to make it easier for people. And Powtoon's a nice animation tool that I've used in the past. So that's just some content tools, but I won't go into too much more detail on that because I feel like I've over-talked about it already.
No, actually, Danny, honestly, I think people are finding it very useful. If you've got anything else to share, if you want to come back to it at any point, no issues, because there's lots of chat going on here. A lot of people sharing stuff as well. So please, don't worry about that, and share as much useful stuff as you've got. Carry on.
Okay, great, good to hear. I think that's part of the fear, is that you think that you need to know Photoshop. When my clients anyway, we do a whole content creation workshop with them, when they see our tools, so the free tools, they go, oh, this is really easy, this is great. So I'm slowly converting the world on Canva, I think, bit by bit. So I've got a few more bits of advice around interviews ideas and also mobile footage. So I think when you're filming someone, it might not feel like interviewing them because it's kind of on your phone, it feels very social, but actually it does require a little bit of thought. And here are some things that I've learned along the way when it comes to interviewing people. So firstly, in the current climate, it might be more efficient to ask experts to essentially interview themselves, i.e. set up their phone on a stable surface and then answer some key questions you sent them to explain those concepts. So what I've done in the past is like, okay, come up with a concept and then say, can you answer these 5 questions? These are the sort of 5 questions that a person learning this would have, and just get them to answer those. If you can get them to do that, that means less editing, which is good, because literally you can just take it and put it in as it is. But if you do have time to interview people via something like Zoom, then the great thing is you can record it and then just cut out the questions in any chapter. So there's a bit more editing. But you're probably more likely to get what you need in the day because you're there and you can actually get them to explain things in different ways. So here are some tips for interviewing people, and I think try and keep the conversation as natural as possible. So think about how you would explain something to someone sitting next to you. So I always, when I'm interviewing someone, I would say, literally, pretend I'm just sat next to you in the office and I've asked you this question. Like, just describe it in purely your own natural language. If you can, ask open questions at first. I think that starts you off, particularly if people are nervous. So, for example, you could say, can you explain to me a little bit about how this works? Or what would normally happen in this situation? And just make it quite broad. And that what you can do is ask clarifying questions and then narrow it down and choose the best bits and then piece them together. And once you've finished clarifying, because I think it's really important for you as the interviewer to also understand what they're saying, because if you understand it, the likelihood is a employee who's being trained will also understand it. Once you finish the clarification part, then you get them to summarise it. As that take can often be a lot better than the first because they've had a chance to talk about it and think about it. So you can say, all right, that's great. Can you say it to me again, but in 30 seconds instead, just to give it a bit shorter? I mean, have them look at you. This is slightly less relevant in the Zoom world, but if you were interviewing someone on mobile or they're doing it at home, if you can get them to, get their husband, wife or family member, what have you, to interview them, it's quite useful to have the camera, have them look off camera, so not down the lens. I think that makes people less nervous as well because they can talk to an actual human being, so it's literally just them and the family member having a conversation and the camera is just filming it towards the side. And it just becomes much more natural. I think if you have someone who is a little bit rambly, should we say, I think it's good to ask them to repeat in less time or just get them to focus on what's important. So asking questions like, what is the most important thing? Okay, but tell me what the 3 most important things are from that answer. That can be really helpful. And repeating the question and the answer as well, particularly if you are not including your questions. So if you're interviewing someone and you just want to have, because ideally you just want to have the answers. Say I ask one, what's the difference between A and B? Then ask the person talking back to you to say, the difference between A and B is to start off the answer. It's a really practical thing, but it quite often gets missed and you have to add it on with text or something otherwise.
Danny, I'm just going to interrupt you there for a second. We've got some background noise. There are keystrokes I can use to mute sound from other people's phones, but it's just not working. I don't know why. So if you have dialed in, please can you mute your phone, because we've got background noise which is making it difficult to hear Danny. Somebody's moving around with the phone.
There's a bit of shuffling around, isn't there? Yeah,
very frustrating.
Oh.
No.
I'm hearing some beeps.
That's me trying to use these keystrokes to mute it. If I knew who it was, I would just expel them from the room, but I can't. Okay, I think somebody's muted, which is great. Okay, sorry to interrupt. By the way, somebody's just asking very quickly, how do you get Canva for free? Sam says he comes up with pricing plans. Is there some top tip for getting Canva for free, or is it just, how did you get it for free?
If you just sign up, so there are pricing plans, which are probably on our website or try and push. So if you just sign up, then it's free, and then you only have to upgrade if you want to go to premium, which is using certain features.
Brilliant. Yes, and Kelly says, I like how matter-of-fact Danielle is, by the way, and so do I, Kelly. I think you're right. It's a combination of good structure, practical experience, and putting it over. You can do it, and here's how. And you're absolutely right, Kelly. Danny, back to you.
Thank you. That's probably the best compliment you can ever give me, I think. So finally, on interview ideas, it's really important, obviously, for people to be comfortable, and it's okay to make mistakes. So when we talk in real life, we make mistakes all the time, and I think it's important to make the video feel natural and authentic. People can make mistakes, and they can fluff their words and just carry on talking. So I encourage people to just carry on talking. If they completely lose their place, you can do it again, but generally speaking, mistakes are fine. And also encourage pauses. I always find, this is quite funny, people will give an answer, they'll get to the end of the answer, and they immediately smile at you or immediately say, is that okay? Or yes, or they celebrate. And that's really hard to edit because you've got literally one word at the end of the answer and then just merging into a celebration. So I always encourage people in interviewing to just, when you finish doing your sentence, just pause, look down the lens or look wherever you're looking, and then you can do your celebration. Otherwise, it's very difficult to sort of cut the end off and you get people celebrating. So finally, mobile video tips. So some of this applies to Zoom as well. So I'm just trying to adapt this. Obviously, this is for mobile footage. So I'm trying to sort of think about both. The first one is hold your phone horizontally. There's a really good video from the Muppets on YouTube called Vertical Video Syndrome. Anyone, I'm sure people have seen that in the past, but it's definitely worth a Google. It's very funny. And it just demonstrates how ridiculous we are when we hold our phone vertically. I know that in social media there's a lot of vertical video happening, but I think if you're doing training videos, let's get it horizontal so it actually can appear on screen. Lens cleaning, really small one, but a weird one. So you'd be surprised how many people's lenses are really smeary, myself included. And the footage just looks really odd, so just give your lens a clean. Optical zooms are awful, so don't zoom in. They make things really, really blurry. If you want to get closer to someone, just literally move closer to them, or get them to move closer to it if you're doing it through Zoom or something, or your husband or wife doing it for you. Lighting is really important not to get wrong, but you don't need a professional rig, so you don't need to buy lights or anything like that. Main thing is to try and get the light in front of your subject and don't position them in front of the window as they end up being silhouetted, which I think lots of us will experience when taking photos. Video, same as photos. If you take a photo of someone standing in front of the window, they're going to be a silhouette. So that's important. And if you want to focus more on your subject, you've got a manual focus on your phone. So literally, I think you might see this again when taking photos. If you're filming a subject, if you just tap their face, then the phone will manually focus on their face, which sometimes can help with that. I always try, this is not on the list, but I always try and put my phone on something, rest it on some books, because I'm personally really shaky. And even if you're not shaky and you're holding your phone for a few minutes, then you will wobble. So if you put it on some books, something like that can really help. And simple one, find somewhere quiet. It doesn't need to be silent. I think as humans, we're used to a lot of noise, and also it doesn't need to be against a white backdrop, but this can be quite boring. So I tend to like to find someone with a plant behind me, or a bit of texture, because that's how we're more used to talking to someone. How often do you talk to someone and they're literally up against the white wall in a silent room? It's not very often. Okay, so back onto the steps. So that was a bit of a detour. Number 5, put it somewhere. So you have all this lovely micro content you've now made with all your cool tools. Where are you going to put it? Is a thing to think about, and I've got a bit more advice around platforms next to come. And also, while you're in the process of putting it somewhere, this is a good opportunity to think about how you will structure it. So, for example, there might be logical sections of the course, might be really key bits you want people to do as pre-work, and others might be more general resources like FAQs and stuff, which you want more in a bank. Because ultimately, remember, if you're breaking down all this sort of factual stuff, people don't necessarily need to go through it all before the session. It could just be a couple of pieces which are really important, and the rest are more resources. And as the aim here is to preload the learners before they attend the event, so they can really get stuck into it. So you don't want to overload them, and just think about what is that stuff that they need to do before they can actually get into the event. And just some ideas on platform tools. I mean, the ideal solution is to put it on your LXP or LMS or something. But remember, if you can't do that for some reason, like I've worked with clients before who've they've got a long process to do that, go through global teams and that sort of thing. And there's always your intranet, or even just hosting things on YouTube, it's just videos or Facebook pages. So I quite often talking to like independent training consultants, and you can put things on YouTube and make them private, and that can be just a nice, free, quick way to get videos out to people before a session if you need it. So don't always feel like it needs to be your LMS or LXP. There are other options if you need to get something out quick. And then step six is, okay, looking at what's left. So what all we've done so far is just extract out that factual stuff and convert it into our content library. But we have to remember that there are other elements that will likely go into our face-to-face, and this is what step 6 is all about. Thinking about, are there key tasks and activities which would normally form part of the practical sessions? And if we're moving these online, do they need to change, or do we actually have new options available to us? So in this stage, I think just making a list and understanding each activity is the best outcome. So this is quite a simple stage. And then we go on to step 7, which is then organising this content for online. Now, I think we all agreed at the beginning that it's really important not to just literally move it online. So what we're going to do is work out how we organise activities, and in some cases, simply by extracting the knowledge elements, you might find that you reduce the contact time by more than half anyway. So in some cases, you might think, okay, I've taken this much out. This is now just an hour webinar, and like in that case, that's actually quite easy and achievable to do. I think in my experience, anything more than 2 hours on webinar is a little bit too much, or video calls is a bit too much. So 2 hour slots, I think, are sort of the maximum. However, it might be that you're left with quite a lot of activities and time to spend on a video call. So we need to think about how that's best delivered. One thing I found which works really well for our workshops at Thrive is a very short morning session and then another short afternoon session with non-contact time in the middle. And the non-contact time can be used to set people individual or group tasks to complete. And the idea is that you only really pull the group together to review these tasks or to set new ones. And we find that by doing that within one day, specifically within one day, it mimics the classroom experience a bit better, and people are less tempted to sort of get on with their emails and stuff in the middle of the day. Like when I've run sessions in the past where they've spread out over multiple days or even multiple weeks, I think people just get back to work because obviously you're very busy and you end up just getting distracted by things. I think if you can make it feel like it's still a day event, that can actually really help. And we've been doing that with our content creation workshops. So with our LXP clients, in the morning they come to the session and we just basically recap on the pre-work, make sure everyone's okay, set a task, it's only 45 minutes. Then the team separate to complete the actual work. And for them, the work is quite practical. They're actually generating content. They're taking an existing piece of training content like a 5-page PDF and breaking it down into literally what I'm talking about here, breaking it down into that bite-sized content. And then we get back together in the afternoon to review and reflect, so people share their videos and share their infographics and things they've made on Canva and stuff. And that works really well. I think if you do that, having some form of online chat in the middle can be really good for the people to talk, share ideas, obviously for the trainers check in rather than training just, going to make a cup of tea for a few hours. But they can actually check in and make sure that everyone's okay. And it doesn't necessarily need to be something practical like that. It could be something as simple as a guided discussion, which I actually think sometimes works better online than in real life. So that's a question to ask as well. Is there stuff that works better online than in real life? Particularly if you're using video call and everyone's sound is on. And so I've noticed that when people's videos are on and sound's on, really hard to get away with quickly writing an email or checking your phone. We've even seen today that just background noise picks up a lot. And type in particular, because it's so close to your mic, people can't really get away with it because this video is like right on your face. I think people actually tend to respond more to conversations and actually tend to concentrate more. I've been in so many training sessions with people and, on their laptops sort of half doing things and you don't want to tell them off like a teacher. So actually I think that discussions can work better online. And finally, it's important to think about which tool you want to use and make sure you're comfortable with it. So there's a few tools that have fancy breakout areas, polls and things like that. I personally find them a bit distracting, but it completely depends on the content. I mean, obviously, make sure you practice with the tool and you're comfortable with using it before you start your session.
Danny, can I jump in with a couple of observations here?
You can.
And I'm sorry, I know it's your presentation and you are doing a fabulous job, but just wanted to say firstly, one of the things that works better online than face-to-face is exactly what we're doing in the chat right now, which is that everyone's pitching in and sharing their thoughts and their ideas and their resources. And you can do that in a well-structured session of people sharing things in a classroom. It's just really easy to do it online, and online everyone can write at the same time. You cannot have everyone in a room talking at the same time. So that's one thing you can do online better than you can do face-to-face. The other thing about tools, and you mentioned polls, I would always have a poll at the beginning of a webinar or a session, but have it in the middle and it can really break up momentum. Sometimes it's the right thing, but sometimes it just breaks things up terribly. That's it. I just wanted to add my couple of thoughts there. Back to you, Danny.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. And also I find that in a face-to-face session, sometimes you might have a few voices who are more dominant as well, and people who are more quiet, whereas online, because we have got that barrier, I think people are more likely to be involved in things like chat. So I think that's a really good point. And so we're on to our final step, step 8, which is weave in social. And think about also what happens after the session. So remember, a big part of what we're missing here when we're not face-to-face is those human interactions. So we do need to think about a way we can help people stay connected, which will also massively help embed their learning. And these can be really simple things, like I said earlier, making sure everyone uses video and audio can be a good place to start. The worst thing is having people on mute, no videos, and you're just talking, sort of like I am now actually, but I'm pretty sure you're there because the chat's going. But just talking at you, particularly training, is not engaging, it's not interactive, and people will switch off. And I've used the word weave here, as I'm a big believer that social isn't something that can just be stuck onto the side to sort of tick a box. It should definitely form core part of any training intervention, as this is so natural to us as humans. So if you think about follow-up tasks to complete, or sometimes it's not just a simple chat. So if you can actually use the session itself to capture some real-life experiences and stories, you can also follow up on those specifically as a group. And this can be achieved through your LXP or another social channel to encourage people to ask questions, share ideas, and talk about what they've learned. It works particularly well with things like leadership management content, as there's so much value, I think, leaders and managers get from each other rather than from the trainer. I mean, I know I've been in sessions before where actually the conversations about problems and advice have been far more valuable than the actual training itself. So I really would encourage that sort of conversation and to capture those. And a really good side benefit of capturing these real-life scenarios and experiences is that, one, at the moment in Zoom, things like that, or a different tool, doesn't have to be Zoom, so I'm not a salesperson for Zoom, but you can actually record them directly in the session and then use this content for your resource bank or for the next session. So say, for example, say when you're exercising to record an elevator pitch for sales training, that's one of the things you're getting people to do in that non-contact time. So everyone's got to record the elevator pitch, and then everyone shares that, and then you talk about which ones are good and which ones you need improvement, etc. You could pick the best one as a group and then use that as a great example for the pre-work in the next session. So you're actually doing is exploiting your learners, really, to actually generate content for yourselves as well, and it's social content, and it's human, and it actually is from people they'll relate to. So same with leadership stuff. If you've got leaders talking about how they approach a one-to-one or how they approach difficult conversation or anything, any bits of advice, you say, well, that's really good. Literally just record them talking on screen. Job done. You've got a piece of content, which is excellent. And I think the other benefit of getting the social conversations happening after the session, and this is really important for me, when I talk about flipped classroom, it's not just, it's sort of three parts for me. It's extracting the fact stuff, applying the training in a session of sorts, and then actually what happens afterwards. And getting those social conversations after can also really help you assess the impact of where the learning is making a difference. You know, if it's really quiet afterwards and people aren't really applying it, then you can see that it hasn't gone so well for some reason. But if you've got a little forum and people actually chatting and sharing ideas and sharing what they've done, and I'm not talking about people sharing, you know, the standard things like, how have you applied this learning in the last week? Because people are so busy, and it's a very weird way to phrase that question. I'm thinking more about, if you've talked about specific things, say you had a really good conversation about running one-to-ones in a leadership training, is actually having a question about, yes, have you done that in your one-to-one, or what happened in your last one-to-one, or like really specific questions for that particular cohort can be really beneficial to seeing those outcomes making a difference. So this is just a summary of the steps we've gone through. So the 8 steps, they're not too many, and hopefully it wasn't too scary. So yeah, any thoughts or questions?
No, everyone's been really quiet, actually. What am I talking about? It's been an absolutely blistering thunderstorm of fantastic questions, comments. A lot of people sharing stuff in the webinar space. Can I just say quickly, because I know we've got 122 people in the room still, I want to say quickly, we've got 7 minutes to try and get as many of these done as possible. Can we just say a big thank you to Danny for such a great job? Cassie is popping some great slides, some great links in there as well, and I'm going to just drop in the link as well to Danny's further information about that. A lot of, okay, Danny, you can't see it, but everyone's coming through with fantastic plaudits for
lovely.
you. Well, because you've done a great job, and it's what I always say, a framework with quality content attached to it. Thank you very much. And of course, I want to say thank you to the people in the room for doing great sharing as well. I've got some shout outs. First question, we had a big ding dong about scripting on videos. Jeff said, never script. Debbie said, but I've heard you should script. Clint says, script's very important. Kelly says, no scripting. And I could go on, right? Everyone's got a strong opinion about this. And I think we had in the middle people saying, how about some hints and nudges rather than a strict script? What's your view about that? I know you said don't script, but some people are saying script can be terribly important. Can we just have a quick review? You know, don't.
Yeah.
Isn't that a valid point? If you're nervous or you lose your place, don't you need a script?
I think, yeah, this is why I mentioned, like, I think if you've got someone who's nervous, some nudges and things are good. But then ultimately, if you've got someone who's really that nervous on videos, then it might be that you should create that piece of content in a different format. Or maybe, as I said, get them to explain it to someone else and then get someone else to explain it back on video.
Yeah.
I think that if you've got the right person on video and it's stuff they know and they're calm, like, they should just be able to talk about it. And particularly, I think this is where the bite-sized thing comes in, right? Scripting, to me, suggests a longer piece of content. If you need to script it, you're talking for too long. If you've just got to talk for 1 minute about a subject, you shouldn't need a script. And it just comes so stale. Like, non-scripted stuff is so much better when you see it from an engagement perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, that's a review. Let's press on, because we could carry on with that all day, couldn't we? Compression ratio.
Absolutely.
Tracy said, if you've got a 5 day face-to-face course, how long should that be online? And I'm not sure it's possible to give that answer without more information. But do you have a heuristic, a rule of thumb, anything?
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I know it's a terrible answer, but it just
depends
on the content, right? Yeah. I mean, as I said, like, my started taking a day course before, and it's come down to about half an hour of resources and about an hour of actual online content, so an hour and a half in total, but it really, really does depend on what the content is.
Okay, and I'm sorry that we can't be more specific than that, Tracy. And I think it is a real question. I appreciate we're not being flippant about it. It is a real issue, but I don't think it's possible to give a standard answer to it, and I think it does absolutely depend on particularly how much content's there. So, Danny, thank you for that answer. And Tracy, if you want to link in with me, and I'm very happy to have a further conversation about that. I'm Donald H. Taylor on LinkedIn. You can just ping me up and let's talk about it in more detail. Don't want to leave you hanging. Interviews and video. Ulrika says, how do you make somebody look at you off camera rather than staring at the camera? Any top tips? I mean, when I'm interviewed, people just say, look at me, and I look at them. But is there anything else to keep people's face on the person they're talking to?
I think, I think apart from position, if you can actually literally position their chair so it's literally tilted towards you, that can help.
Right.
Just because you're physically, it actually then you have to
idea.
turn your neck to look at the camera. So that's a good one. And I generally find that when someone's talking directly to a person, they actually prefer that and looking down the lens anyway. You will find sometimes you get people's eyes flicker to the lens, because they're a bit conscious it's there, but it is just a bit of practice. But yeah, if you can turn the chair, that can help. get people to look at you.
Yeah, okay. Now, actually, you know what? Really simple point, but yeah, point the chair. They will follow the direction of the chair. Good point.
Yeah. Oh, actually, and nodding as well. I find
Oh,
when
God,
someone
it's
gives you
so
an answer,
important. When,
if you can
yes,
just nod. Yeah.
smile and nod.
Smile and nod.
And your interviewee will look at you. It absolutely works, doesn't it? Okay.
Yeah, it does, yeah.
Any top tips about simple video editing? If people want to add layers such as text, any thoughts about that? I don't know if you covered it. I was a bit overwhelmed by the chat.
Yeah, no, so I think, I mean, things like iMovie and stuff is fine. I used to use a tool called Splice, which was an app you could download. And then another one I use called Clipchamp, which is a desktop one rather than mobile. If you can use, there's loads of mobile ones which are free. If you can use a mobile one, then it's easier because you can capture, edit, and you're done. Whereas if you have to like transfer the files to your desktop and then edit, it can be a bit of a pain. But Clipchamp's quite good, Splice and iMovie, just for like literally just transitions and cutting things and putting text on, that sort of stuff.
Thank you. Very good. Ian Oglesby Cartledge asks, if anybody in the room can help Ian out, I'd love it if you could. How are people overcoming the challenge of rolling out digital content to global teams? Are you leaning on support networks, internal teams to translate and so on? So please help Ian out if you can. Corinne, I'm sorry if you're feeling a bit overwhelmed with the links. There are a lot in there, it's true. What I'm going to do, Corinne, at the end of this, I will pull out all the HTML links, and where there's a comment, they'll be all in one place. That will make it easier to access. And I'm also going to stick it on LinkedIn so you can find it. All right, and then feel free to go off and explore. I appreciate with it all shooting by, it's difficult. Andrew Zach said Splice, and what was the other one? Can you come back to Andrew with the other tool?
Yes, iMovie and Clipchamp.
Fantastic.
Clipchamp, like it's got a monkey logo, I think.
Okay, it's got a monkey logo, like so many of these things. Richard B, any benchmark on number of man hours? This is a similar question to Tracy's. The number of man hours or person hours to design e-learning content. You want 1 hour of e-learning content. How many hours of work did it take? Now, I used to hear it was 10 hours of work for 1 hour of content, but again, I think it depends. But Danny, do you have an answer on that one?
And I guess my advice would be, avoid making 1 hour of content. And I think that's sort of like when you're thinking about e-learning packages, the rule of thumb that I mentioned earlier was I took a day training course and it took me an hour to map it out, and then it took me about half a day to make the content after that with the experts. So probably about, for a day course, you're probably looking at 2 days work to actually do everything from start to finish, and everything broken down, everything digitized. Again, depending on the subject, but that's what I found works quite well.
Okay, well, thank you for that. And Mike says also 10 hours as well for an hour, yeah, roughly. Thanks for all the questions coming in. And look, Corinne says, we're so behind in the virtual world where I work, I just use iMovie. Please don't feel that you are behind. There are so many sessions, so many people that feel this, but we've all got tools that we can use. So always work where you are with where you've got, and please use the network, me, other people in the network, to support you if you can. Do you need permission to record before the start of a webinar? You know what, Colleen, and Debbie's asking the same question as well. Do you have to get permission from the attendees if you record a webinar? This is a great question. Danny, do you ask for that permission before you record a webinar?
I would normally make them aware that I'm going to record it. So we record most of our workshops, and I normally say, just be aware I'm going to record it. I don't ask for sort of written permission or anything like that, but partly because, all that sort of stuff is protected under our contracts with our clients, typically. So, and similar to an employee, right? Okay. I don't think that's
I think it's a really good point, and definitely one has to be sensitive to that. And I apologise for not mentioning that at the beginning, and I probably should have done. Andrew said, what platform do you prefer for delivering a 2-hour online seminar? Me, I would use the platform we're using at the moment, Adobe Connect, but I know Charles Jennings earlier talked about Zoom very glowingly, and other people are using Zoom very effectively at the moment. There is a wide range of platforms available. I wouldn't necessarily... Oh, Rexel, I did mention the preamble. Thank you, Rex. I appreciate that. GoToMeeting, Richard uses. I wouldn't get caught up on the platform for the moment, to be honest, because I find that all of the platforms do lots of the same things. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. I would concentrate on making sure that how the session is delivered is going to be as effective as possible. And I'm sorry to be dull with that, but I really think the platforms are not quite interchangeable, but almost. And so Charles was positive about that. Andy W said, sorry, if you're being videoed and you're demonstrating that something's white and you're wearing a white shirt in front of a white background, it's not clear. And I would say don't, as is I have a lot of striped shirts in my wardrobe. Don't wear a striped shirt if you're being videoed. It can really play havoc with the video. Danny, I have to just take some hits on some comments that were made. I jumped in when you were speaking on point 7 saying, look, we can all chat at the same time. But you know what? A lot of people said, Don, that's not necessarily a good thing. And I want to just give them credit because it's a fair point. Rex said, look, it's all right if you've got a moderator to look at the chat. Other people said, and said, every typing at the same time is not necessarily better. And if everyone's talking to each other in class and not listening to the teacher, things may be lost. That's true. This isn't actually a teaching situation, Ant, but I take the point. But I think adults have the choice of what to listen to, but I do take the point. But another good point Ant raised was questions could be lost. Now, the way around that, which we didn't do in this session, is to have a separate box for questions. But I do take the point, Ant, thank you for raising it. And I think it's really important to always to acknowledge when people have raised good points in the webinar. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, I guess, and also just to add to that, use your logic in the sense that you're unlikely to have a training session with 120 people, are you?
I hope so.
Ideally, you could have a smaller training session, and the chat is more for during the off non-contact time.
So Corinne's asked, what about questions that don't get answered in the webinar? Do you reply to them individually? Well, I don't with the LSG webinars. What I do is I copy from the chat, I put it into a separate Word document, Corinne, and then I make sure those are answered. And actually, we've answered all the questions that were brought up. But that then gives you a mechanism for sharing them. An alternative way, of course, is to have a separate chat in which questions are put. The difficulty with that is it requires a bit more moderation because you have to be reading two things simultaneously and you might concentrate too much on the question and not on the chat area. So it swings and roundabouts. Gary, thanks for coming along. Great to have you with us. I'm just going to give a shout out to, I'm just going to repeat, first off, that everything's going to be available from the chat area, from the Learning Skills group. There we go. I'm going to put in the link again to Danny's brilliant 8 simple steps posting. There you go, in the ebook. So please go and download that. I'll do the outro in a second. I'm going to give a shout out to Cosmina, Charles, and who both said effectively, look, don't, and this was underlining your point, Danny, don't try and just take what you do on face-to-face and somehow replicate it online. That doesn't work. And I think you've shown us the very good ways in which you can make it work. And Kelly from UK Coaching said, we've had more success and better user experience reported with online classrooms as opposed to face-to-face, which we didn't envisage. It really does work, but agree, there's a process to follow to ensure quality assurance and consistency. Thank you for that. I really appreciate that. Oh, Sophie, which link doesn't work? Oh, gosh. My link to Learning and Skills Group doesn't work because I've misspelt Learning and Skills Group. What an idiot I am. Okay, I apologise for that. I'll put the right link in a second. Let me just quickly do the outro. If you've enjoyed it, if you found this useful, please give Danny some plaudits by letting people know about it on Twitter with LSG webinar on the hashtag learningandskillsgroup.com. Okay, that's the place to go to. Thank you for raising that, Sophie. I'm a complete chump. Yes, that's where we can get things from. And if you want to find out what's coming up next week, May 21st, we've got a look at how you can choose an e-learning platform effectively, June 11th, and so on. Go to bit.ly/LSG events and you'll be able to find all of the forthcoming events from us. Yeah, Mike, I did cut and paste. Unfortunately, the link that I cut and pasted was wrong. That's how bad I am at moderating webinars. Go to somebody else for advice. Listen, it's been great. Thank you to everybody in the room for your input. We've had some great stuff there. I'm not going to sift through everything, pull out all the URLs. Looking forward to doing that and sharing it. But finally, a great thank you to Danielle Hamilton,